Hello, folks. Happy Wednesday or whatever day it is that you have connected with us. Welcome back to the DFREE Wealth Lab. You know that a laboratory is a place where you research and discover. And our hope is that you would use this laboratory, this time with these experts to research and discover ways to increase your wealth. We always say at DFREE that the first step towards financial freedom is saying yes to no debt. But being out of debt is not the goal. Being out of debt is just the first step towards reaching your goal of high net worth and assets and leaving generational wealth as a part of your legacy. So my name is DeForest B. Soares Jr., in case you didn't know, and we've been at this for 21 years. And during those 21 years, we've had opportunities to do so many activities, have so many events. And if you're not familiar with all of what we do and what we're planning to do for the rest of this year, go to dfree.com. And at that website, you'll learn much more about what DFREE is, who DFREE is involved with, who our partners are. And of course, our key partner, our longest running partner, is Prudential Financial. They called me in 2011 and said, "We like what you're doing. How can we help?" And we've been working together ever since. And that work includes the sponsorship of this podcast that we produce weekly. And I'm just grateful to Prudential for all of their help, and more importantly, for the people at Prudential, like our guest today, who bring us so much valuable information that we could never pay for it if we had to. Now, before we introduce our guest, don't forget you can post your question in the chat while we're talking, and you can go to the dfreecommunity.com and join and be a part of our movement. And all things DFREE can be found there. Our guest today is a young man. I know he looks too young to be giving financial advice. Looks like he just graduated from high school, but he's a young man for whom I have great respect, someone who spends every day of his life working towards the empowerment of our community through financial freedom. He is fluent in American Sign Language, having been raised by parents who are hearing impaired, and he uses that as a part of his arsenal of empowerment and equipping our community. And so I'd like to introduce some and present to everyone Brother Tyrone Thorpe. Is a financial planner with and offers securities and investments and advisory services through LPL Enterprise, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC, FINRA/SIPC. If you ever run into someone who wants to give you financial advice and they're not a part of a company or a firm that's a member of FINRA or SIPC, run. Don't trust them, because these are the authentic organizations and agencies that send out professional financial advisors. And and he is an affiliate of LPL Financial. So welcome, Ty Thorpe from the Midwest to the DFREE Wealth Lab.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And before we begin, I must read out this disclosure. So the opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities or insurance products may be required to affect some of the strategies. Investing involves risks, including possible loss of principal. To determine which investment or financial strategy may be appropriate for you, consult with a professional prior to taking any action. Prudential advisors and LPL Enterprise, as well as LPL Financial, do not provide tax or legal advice or services. Please consult your tax and or legal advisor regarding your specific situation. Today, we will be discussing the sandwich generation. Right? What is the sandwich generation? We'll get into that. But it's a generation of people who care for their aging parents while supporting their own children. And according to the Pew Research Center, about a quarter of US adults are now so-called sandwich generation, finding themselves simultaneously raising a child, holding a job, and caring for an elderly parent. The reasons behind this generation is that we are living longer, right? As a society, a lot of people are delaying marriage and having children a lot later. There's the boomerang children. There are more women in the workforce, and then there are smaller families, right? Which means fewer siblings to share in that caregiving, right? So these things are the reasons why we see this evolution of the sandwich generation. The stresses associated with being quote unquote sandwich. So the split time between children's and parents' needs. It's finding time for one's marriage, finding time for personal needs, finding resources to care for oneself, the children, and the parents, being able to deal with the guilt of not having enough time to do it at all. And then addressing healthcare options such as Medicare, supplemental policies, long-term care for parents, all these things, together combined can create a lot of stress on a person, on a family, on a household. So, it's important that we become aware of what's happening and also become aware of what solutions are available or resources are available to help us be able to get through this. Caring for Asian parents, you always want to think about how can you assemble a support team, whether it's siblings or professionals or friends or volunteers. Even through employer benefits, there may be some resources there as well, right? The day-to-day demands for both an aging parent and children can put a tremendous amount of strain, both emotionally and financially, on the primary caregiver. It is a lot that is required of a caregiver. And when it comes to time to make a decision about your parents, when you move into your home, where you go into, or like, will you move into your parents' home, or will they go into an assisted living facility or a nursing home, or will they stay at home? These different decisions that have to be made aren't always as straightforward and easy, right? So it's important to ask for help if you're able to. You don't have to do this alone, depending on your situation and circumstance. If you have siblings, be sure to have them be involved. If you don't have any siblings, try to rely on or reach out to or leverage experts if you're able to. Ask friends and family for any support that you can get. Ask your employer if there are any resources available through the group benefits that they offer. And also you can seek out counseling as well. Caring for young children, right? Your children may be feeling the impact of your situation, and sometimes it can be more impactful than we may believe or you may think, right? So at a time when they still need your patience and attention, you may be preoccupied with your parents. And of course, that can take away time that you're spending with your child. Also if you're, working, having your meetings at work and deadlines and juggling all these things, all these financial obligations that you have, it can put stress on a situation. But here are some things to keep in mind as you try to balance your family's needs. So first and foremost, try to make time for your children, right? Plan a special one-on-one activity, such as, attending a sporting event or a concert, with your child or your children. Involve your children in those caregiving tasks, if possible, no matter how small they may be. They can be a helper as well. Explain what changes may come about as you begin caring for your parents. So just have that open conversation with them and make sure that they are aware of the adjustments that may be on the horizon. Make a family plan and make sure that your children feel involved in the decision making. Discuss how they are feeling emotionally, just their feelings, their struggles, or any expectations that they may have. Make sure that they have their own space if possible. And finally, be sure that as they pitch in with additional tasks around the house, that they know that you are grateful for them, for their help and their support, so that you express that gratitude to them as well. On the other side of the sandwich generation, right, are young adult children who aren't able to reach financial independence, right? Graduating from college once meant getting a quote unquote real job and living on your own. However, with today's soft job market, many recent graduates are realizing that they can't live independently, as soon as they initially thought. And they are finding shelter under their parents' roof once again, and they are being, dubbed the boomerang generation, or failure to launch kids. If your children return home, make them, you can, have them contribute to the household if possible. Don't allow them to just live in your home without making any significant contributions to the household, either in the form of work or the form of financial contribution, right? Be very clear about expectations of your children or your child, if they have to come back home after college. If your child is employed, suggest that they pay a reasonable rent for the room and cover their own expenses, right? Such as food and gas money and things like that. If your child is seeking employment, suggest that they help take care of the household chores and seek out a part-time job where possible. If a child, if they're just sitting around in their room and months go by and they're consuming, your resources, that isn't really helping you, right? And it's not helping themselves either. So in a situation like that, it just adds to more stress. If your parents still require care when your children move back home, it's completely reasonable to expect occasional caregiving from your child as well. So it's important to discuss, how long they can stay, develop a time limit as far as how long they will be able to stay. Whether it's once you have saved up enough to be able to live, or save up 2 months of rent for an apartment, or until you get a full-time job, et cetera, et cetera. But expect more from them because you deserve it, and they deserve it as well. So caring for adult children along with caring for an elderly parent can again just add more stress. Financial strategies for the sandwich generation. So while the sandwich generation caregivers face some issues, there are ways to help lower your stress levels and ease that financial burden, right? In particular, you may want to consider your financial house, just making sure your financial house is in order, which includes, your financial goals, making a budget, and having input from your children and parents, and working together to ensure that you all stay on top of any debt that may be on the balance sheet. It's also important to invest wisely, keep an emergency fund, and also discuss healthcare options with your parents as well. And you'll want to ensure your assets are adequately insured. Make sure that you have an estate planning attorney. Ensure that you claim tax benefits, where possible. And if they apply to your situation, make sure that you claim any children as a dependent, or any person as a dependent if you're able to. Among other requirements, if anyone makes less than $4,400 a year, generally not including Social Security payments, and you can, those amounts will change over time. And then, of course, when it comes to just the finances, make sure you put yourself first financially as well. I know that when we start taking care of others, sometimes you can put yourself at the bottom of the list. But be sure to always take care of yourself and put yourself first as well. But let's take a closer look at some of these financial strategies. First and foremost, updating your financial goals, right? Always reviewing that, keep it in front of you, write it down. Create and maintain an emergency fund. So at least 6 months of your expenses, making sure that you have that in savings. If you don't have it, taking the time to build it up over time. And then just understanding that your time is valuable, right? So you want to invest your time wisely. Next is maintaining control of your debt, right? They say there's bad credit, there's good credit, there's good debt, there's bad debt, but make managing your debt a high priority item for yourself, right? Reduce any credit card balances, where possible, consolidate debt where possible, and then just avoid incurring any unnecessary debt as well. So just keeping this under control will help you just put yourself in a better financial situation long term. For those that have smaller children and you want to send them off to college one day, that's something that you can start planning for and thinking about, now. So you plan for your child's education. There's ways that you can invest or save for their education. Of course, there are student loans that can be taken out. But what would that look like? 10 years from now, 20 years from now, right? How much will a college education cost? So things to think about is you can invest, right? So looking at the chart, looking at this table, if you want to get up to $50,000 and you only have three years to build up to that amount, right? You would have to put away, $1,265, right? And hoping that you get at least a decent rate of return. Here we're using a 6% rate of return to be able to put those dollars away on a monthly basis and build up to that $50,000. So as you see, the longer the runway you have. So if you have 19 years until college, then it's only $117 that you're putting away. So if you have a lot of time, it takes less money that you are, out of pocket or putting away. And if you have a shorter time frame, it's going to take a lot more, from you out of pocket to be able to get up to that savings goal. So planning for college, there's something called 529 plans, which is a very popular savings vehicle for, to save for education. There are different ways you can help fund your child's education. So 529 is being one of them. And, with that, it is a tax advantage method of saving for future college expenses that is authorized by Section 529 of the Internal Revenue Code. In addition to potential tax-free growth, advantages of the 529 include a high contribution limit, but it does vary by state. And also you have control over the investments within that account, and you have the ability to change the plan beneficiary. So if your child gets a scholarship and they don't need the dollars in the 529, if you have another child, you can change the beneficiary to the other child. 529s also allow the account holder to establish a college savings account for a beneficiary and use the money to pay for tuition, room and board, any mandatory fees and required books, and computers as well. The money contributed to the account can be invested in stock or bonds or mutual funds. It can be in the money market as well. And those earnings are not subjected to federal income tax, as long as the money is used for what's called qualified higher education expenses. The plans are open to both adults and children, and many states offer their own 529 plan with its own unique features. So you should check with your individual state for details of the state's plan. Other options when it comes to saving for college are, Coverdell education, savings accounts, college prepayment plans, mutual fund accounts, savings bonds, and the uniform gift and transfers to minors account. So when when you start to look into these different things, you'll see that there are many options available. So the Coverdell Education Savings Account, formerly known as an education IRA, is a trust or custodial account and is set up to pay for qualified educational expenses. When the account is established, the designated beneficiary must be under the age of 18 or be a special needs beneficiary. The account must be designated as a Coverdell ESA when it is created, and the document creating and governing the account must be in writing, and it must meet certain criteria. Contributions must be made in cash. They are not deductible. Any individual whose modified adjusted gross income is under the set limit for the given tax year can make contributions. There is no limit to the number of accounts that can be established for a particular beneficiary. However, the tax year can, or I'm sorry, however, the total contribution to all the accounts on behalf of the beneficiary in any year cannot exceed $2,000. Next is focusing back on the aging parents, healthcare options, right? With your parents, which is a discussion that is important as well. So discuss healthcare options with your parents. It might be difficult to approach your parents at times with about this topic and start getting the conversation going. But planning early can help pay off tremendously and help you financially and emotionally. If you explore possibilities while your parents are still healthy, more options are available. Plus, your parents can help work toward a mutually desired goal. There are several healthcare options available for aging parents. Some of the most common are home healthcare, which provides seniors with medical and mobility difficulties with home health aides who visit on a regular basis to help with bathing needs, preparation of meals, house cleaning, supervision of medication, or transportation to and from medical appointments. Another option is adult daycare that offers activities, recreation, meal supervision of your parents while you're at work. Most adult daycare centers offer transportation to and from home as well. Then there are group homes. So this type of environment is usually located in a residential home. Elderly individuals in a group home, they share an environment in those shared rooms. Often these homes are supervised and maintained by employees who can clean, cook, but who may not be trained in medical or healthcare. So this type of facility is known as a board or care home. Next are assisted living facilities. So these offer apartments and services for those who need a little extra supervision or help dealing with daily tasks and challenges. And then finally, there are long-term care facilities, which offer private and shared rooms in the facility where around-the-clock care is provided for individuals that need that, assistance around their daily living activities. Next thing to consider is the creation of an estate plan. Do you have a will? Is it current? Or do your caregivers have a copy of the estate plan or the will? Is there a living will or an advanced care directive? Is there a health care proxy? And does anyone have power of attorney? So very important step overall, and something to definitely have a conversation around. Now, a will is a legal instrument, usually written, that lists your wishes regarding the distribution of your property after death and identifies who will manage the distribution and who will care for your children. If you die without a will, state laws will dictate how those matters are handled. The requirements for a valid will vary from state to state. A trust, on the other end, is a legal arrangement, usually created by a written document, under which one party, the trustee, manages property contributed to the trust by the grantor for the benefit of others, which are the beneficiaries. So back to putting yourself first, prioritize your retirement planning. Don't get so caught up with taking care of your loved ones' physical and financial well-being that you forget your own. So always remember to put yourself first as well. Protect your assets with insurance. It's also important to make sure your own assets are adequately protected. Does anyone know how you protect your income, or assets from risk? It's something to think about, or something to ask yourself. Some things are, things like life insurance, disability income insurance, home and auto insurance, as well as health insurance, long-term care insurance, as well. Insurance planning by life stage, right? When you're just starting out, you have, if you're just starting out, you have liabilities and funeral expenses. With a growing family, you have the liabilities, funeral expenses, disability income, survivor income needs, retirement and education savings needs. And then with the sandwich generation, you have, all of those things, but as well as the estate settlement piece. And then with the pre-retiree and retirement stage, there's the estate settlement, but expanding from that is the long-term care needs as well. There are different types of life insurance that's available. All right, so if something happens to you, something to think about is who will take care of your children and your parents. So life insurance can be something to think about. There are two types of life insurance, term and permanent. We're going to talk about these in a very generalized manner. So the descriptions don't relate to any specific product. But term insurance is temporary, right? It lasts for a term, a defined period of time. Most commonly, the premiums are level for a period of time, usually 10 or 20 years. And then after that, it's followed by a period of annually increasing premiums. And insurance companies have all variations of this. Permanent insurance can last for a lifetime or an indefinite period of time, as long as you pay your premiums when it's due and don't make substantial loans or withdrawals from the policy. So if you want to help your beneficiaries have money to pay for your estate taxes, for example, or funeral expenses, whether you die at 65 or 95, then a permanent policy could potentially be something to think about. Long-term care insurance, typically, is for, who is it for? It's for you and the people who depend on you. What does it do? It covers the costs incurred, in cases of a long-term chronic illness or disability. Things to consider are just the cost of care and the policy features and the amount of coverage. So long-term care can be an important part of your overall financial wellness strategy. Having to pay for long-term care out of pocket is very expensive and could potentially wipe out your savings and your income. So long-term care insurance helps mitigate that risk and ensure you will have coverage, have the coverage you need while you are able to maintain your assets in your income stream. Long-term care services, again, can be expensive. So you can pay out of pocket, or you may have to depend on family members to help pay for it. There are some options through Medicare and Medicaid. And then, of course, there's a long-term care insurance as well. Medicare. So Medicare is different parts or different options within the Medicare system. So you evaluate those options, whether it's Part A, B, C, or D. Enrollment begins at age 65, right? So at that age, or right before you turn 65, is something that you want to start looking into and thinking about. Medical expenses is the second largest expense behind housing costs during retirement. So thinking about these things and planning for these things are extremely important. Still speaking on Medicare, federal health insurance, it covers 63 million people. For people who are 65 and older, that's who Medicare is for. Certain disabled individuals it can cover, and then people with end age renal disease as well. And there's a tax that is paid. So as when you work, you're paid within your payroll taxes. Some of that is covering Medicare. So it's important to evaluate your Medicare options, right? Just hospital insurance, medical advantage plans, your prescription drug plans as well. There are a number of options that are available. It can be confusing. To reduce confusion, don't be afraid to always lean on and ask for help. Um, Medicare Part A. So there's the different parts: Part A, B, C, and D. Medicare Part A helps cover inpatient care in hospitals. Medicare Part B covers doctors and other healthcare providers and services. And then Medicare Part C, also known as Medicare Advantage plans, includes all benefits and services covered under Part A and B. And Part C plans are run by Medicare approved private insurance companies and usually include Medicare prescription drug coverage as well. And then Medicare Part D helps cover the cost of any prescription drugs. Life stages. So as time progresses, as we live, we go through different life stages, and there's a document that is available to you all that can be provided, which gives you each milestone in your through your life stage. So the sandwich period can be a major trial, right, in life, but with some careful planning, clear communication, it's a period that can be rewarding too. Connecting with your parents during their final years, and while also helping your children find their way in the world, can make this stressful time become a meaningful one, right? So draw on your strength, from different ways to making meaningful is to draw, strength from your faith. Set aside time for yourself. Seek family support. Talk to your employer. Get professional assistance. Keep your financial home in order. Organize important papers and information. Get your affairs in order. Ask for help, and make a family plan, and also just stay in touch, with friends as well. Here are some resources that are available to you for those that are caregivers. There are plenty of resources available, so it's good to try to take advantage of those resources if possible. And that concludes our discussion. I hope that you found this information valuable. If you have any additional questions or would like to connect with a financial planner, you can scan the QR code. The QR code was on many other slides, but here it is again. You can scan the QR code, complete the form with your contact, and we will reach out to you to schedule a day and time to have a conversation. So it's been my pleasure. Again, my name is Tyrone Thorpe. I am a financial planner with Prudential. I want to thank DFREE for having me, and I hope that you all found this information valuable. Thank you.
I want to thank Brother Tyrone Thorpe for that marvelous presentation. These are things that we need to think about all the time, not only for ourselves, but for other people. My father died when he was 47 years old. My mother was 44. I was 24. And that was 51 years ago. And for all of this time, I've had the responsibility of my mother. When I got married and had children, I then still had the responsibility of my mother and the responsibility of my children. And that didn't mean that my mother was helpless, but it did mean that she required, first of all, just my emotional support. For 51 years, she was without a partner, without a husband. And as the oldest child, I was her primary companion. But in her later years, when she got sick and required doctor visits and required a car and required help with her rent, I became a financial supporter. And not only did I need to have to write checks, but as you heard in this presentation, I had to understand, I had to learn about Medicare long before I had Medicare. I had to learn about all kinds of senior issues. And so this kind of information is important. And what we want you to do is to learn it, even if it does not affect you right now. Listen, DFREE is a resource, and it's a resource that's not only aimed at people who are having very specific right now experiences, but a resource for the community. Because if we didn't know this before, and I'll keep saying it week after week, we need each other now more than we've ever needed each other before. Taxes are complicated, student loans are complicated, investing is complicated, life is complicated and getting more complicated. With the emergence of AI, we have both the blessing and the burden of technology disrupting our lives, and it can be positive or negative. So listen, I want you to really embrace this information, take notes, write down the important things, and most importantly, contact us if you need help. If you need an advisor, if you need a coach, if you need help with credit, contact us. Info@dfree.com is where you go if you're a pastor or a church or business and you'd like DFREE to be brought to your community, to your membership, to your company. I want you to go to dfree.com, join the DFREE community, keep up with what we're doing, and take this information seriously. Prudential is our partner and has been for 15 years. Prudential is our sponsor. And so, like we did today, we bring the best and the brightest of the Prudential advisors to share with you the kind of information that helps you make informed decisions about your finances. Till next time, this is DeForest B. Soares Jr. I thank you for listening and watching and being a part of the DFREE movement.